It was our college reunion. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I'd heard she was coming. Mia. Her name alone brought back a rush of memories I wasn't prepared for. Nostalgia mixed with something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. I kept replaying the moments we'd spent together, the way she laughed, the warmth of her touch, the stolen nights we thought no one knew about. I couldn't decide if I was excited to see her or if the thought terrified me. The venue was alive, buzzing with laughter and chatter. People hugged each other tightly, voices rising and falling with excitement as they reconnected. But while everyone else seemed to be reliving the past, I was focused on the door, waiting for her. And then she walked in. Mia. She was late like always, but her entrance was unforgettable. Her dress hugged her frame perfectly, and her hair fell over her shoulders as if the years hadn't touched her at all. The moment she stepped into the room, it was like the air shifted. Or maybe it was just me. Our eyes met briefly, and it was like time folded in on itself. For a moment, I wasn't Caleb the husband, Caleb the man trying to do the right thing. I was just a college boy again, captivated by her. Then she broke the gaze and walked further into the room, and I was left wondering if she had felt it too. "Caleb!" someone shouted, yanking me back to reality. I forced a smile and joined the group gathered at the bar. They were talking about old times, about the wild things we used to do. Someone nudged me with a grin. "Hey, remember when you and Mia were caught in the library? You weren't exactly hitting the books, if you know what I mean." The group burst into laughter and my face burned. "Let's not go there," I mumbled, avoiding Mia's gaze. But she just smiled, a slow, knowing smile that was impossible to ignore. The conversation moved on, but my thoughts didn't. Every time I glanced her way, she was already looking at me. Her lips curved into that same smile. It was maddening. As the night wore on, the crowd began to thin, and people exchanged contact information to stay in touch. When it was Mia's turn, she hesitated for a moment before handing me her phone. "Put your number in," she said softly. I did, and she took mine too. Her fingers brushed against mine as she handed the phone back. It felt deliberate. Before she left, she leaned in close, her voice low and deliberate. "It was nice seeing you again, Caleb," she said, her eyes locking with mine. I nodded, struggling to find the right words. "Yeah, you too." That night I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with messages from the group chat as everyone shared pictures from the reunion, laughing about how much fun they had. And then her picture appeared. Mia was smiling, her hair slightly tousled, her eyes sparkling in the dim light of the bar. I stared at the photo longer than I should have, my mind drifting back to all the moments we'd shared. Just then, my wife Laura walked into the room. I quickly closed the picture, setting my phone aside. "How was the reunion?" she asked, climbing into bed. "It was good," I said casually, though my heart was still racing. She nodded, already looking tired. I leaned closer, wanting to touch her. It had been so long since we shared that kind of closeness, and I needed it tonight. Needed her to help me forget the thoughts swirling in my mind. But she sighed and turned away. "I'm too tired," she murmured, her voice barely audible. I pulled back, disappointment settling over me like a heavy blanket. As Laura drifted off to sleep, I stared at the ceiling, Mia's face flashing in my mind. I hated the pull she still had over me, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push her out. The next morning, I arrived at work later than usual. My friend Jude noticed right away. "Late start?" he asked, leaning casually against my desk. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Some days are just like that." Jude studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp. "You all right, man? You look distracted." "I'm fine," I said quickly, though my tone didn't exactly back me up. Jude smirked knowingly, clearly sensing there was more to it. He leaned closer, his voice dropping slightly. "You know, it's been a while for me. Haven't been with a woman in forever. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind." Without thinking, I blurted out, "Me too." Jude froze, his eyes wide with disbelief before breaking into a laugh. "Wait, what? You? Caleb, you're married." I sighed, running a hand through my hair as I glanced around to make sure no one else could hear us. "Yeah, but my wife's always tired. Every night it's the same thing." Sometimes it feels like we're just, I don't know, roommates instead of husband and wife." Jude let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Man, you're finished. A married guy going without? That's rough." I shrugged, not knowing what else to say. Jude leaned in, his voice quieter now, almost conspiratorial. "Look, I know this place. Real discreet, no strings attached. You go, pick who you like, and just relax. No one will ever know." I hesitated, the weight of his suggestion settling uncomfortably over me. "I don't know, Jude. That's not really my thing." "Come on, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with a grin. "I'm not saying make it a habit, just once. What's the harm? Think of it as me helping out a friend. I'll even cover for you this time." I didn't agree right away, but by the end of the day, I found myself nodding reluctantly, even as a gnawing sense of guilt crept in. Deep down, I knew it was a mistake. After work, Jude and I waited in silence until the last of our co-workers left. The office felt eerily quiet, every sound amplified as I wrestled with the growing knot of guilt in my chest. "You sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Relax," Jude said, grinning as he grabbed his coat. "You'll thank me later." The drive to the club was a silent one. My nerves buzzed with anticipation and unease. When we arrived, I almost laughed. From the outside, the building looked ordinary. Faded paint, dim lighting, and no sign to suggest what lay within. But the moment we stepped inside, everything changed. The lighting was low and moody, casting soft shadows across the room. The faint hum of seductive music filled the air, blending with the gentle clink of glasses and the hushed murmur of conversations. Women moved with practiced ease, their laughter soft and inviting. Jude nudged me forward, his excitement palpable. "Pick someone," he whispered, gesturing toward the room. I hesitated, my eyes scanning the crowd. I felt out of place, as though the walls were closing in. But then I saw her, a woman sitting at the far end, poised and confident. There was something about her, something magnetic. "Her," I said softly, and Jude grinned. "Good choice," he said, giving me a nudge. I followed her into a private room, my heart pounding louder with every step. The door clicked shut, and I found myself in a space that felt both intimate and surreal. The lighting was dim, the air thick with tension. She moved closer, her presence intoxicating. Her every action was deliberate, her touch igniting something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like stepping into a world where nothing else mattered. For a fleeting moment, my thoughts dissolved, and I let myself give in to the sensation, to the escape. When it was over, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. I emerged from the room to find Jude waiting, his grin as wide as ever. "So?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. I felt good," I admitted, though my voice carried a weight I couldn't shake. Jude clapped me on the shoulder, laughing. "See? Told you. You're welcome." But then I saw her. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. She was standing by the bar, her back to me, her hair cascading over her shoulder. My stomach twisted as a familiar unease settled in. She turned slightly, her fingers brushing her hair to the side. And that's when I froze. It was Mia. I couldn't believe it. What was she doing here? My chest tightened as memories from the reunion and our past came flooding back. She noticed me almost instantly, her eyes widening in surprise before narrowing into a mischievous gaze. "Caleb," she said, her voice low and teasing, "I didn't expect to see you here." My throat was dry. "Mia," I managed, though my voice cracked. She stepped closer, her smile playful. "Your wife not enough for you?" Her words hit like a slap, and my initial shock gave way to anger. "Stop it, Mia," I said, my voice firm, though my resolve felt shaky. "Don't do this." But she was relentless, her confidence unwavering. She leaned in, her breath warm against my neck. I tensed, every nerve on edge. When she tilted her head to kiss me, I pulled back, not entirely willingly, but enough to put space between us. She paused, her smile not fading. Instead, she leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "I'll be here anytime you come back." And with that, she stepped back, her eyes locking with mine for one last, lingering moment before she turned and walked away. I stood there, frozen, as Jude's voice broke through the haze. "Caleb, you good, man?" I nodded, though nothing about this felt right. My mind raced as I followed Jude out of the club. Jude drove me home in silence, the weight of the night pressing heavily on my chest. I stared out of the window, the image of Mia's teasing smile replaying in my mind. Her words, her touch, the way she whispered in my ear. It was like she still had a hold on me. When we arrived at my house, Jude smirked. "Don't overthink it, Caleb. You needed that." I nodded, though I couldn't shake the guilt pooling in my stomach. "Yeah, thanks, Jude." As I stepped inside, the house was dark, save for the faint glow from our bedroom lamp. I tiptoed to the room, careful not to wake Laura. But as I slipped inside, she stirred, her soft voice breaking the silence. "You're late," she murmured sleepily. "Work?" "Yeah," I lied, grabbing my pajamas. She hummed and turned onto her side, but then, surprising me, she reached out for me. Her arms wrapped around my waist and she pressed a kiss to my chest. "I missed you," she whispered. Her touch was warm, genuine, and for a moment it unraveled me. I froze, unsure how to react. Then she kissed me again, slow, tender, and full of love. My guilt clawed at me, sharp and relentless, but her touch was pulling me in, her love undeniable. I wanted to lose myself in her, to let her erase everything that had happened tonight. As I kissed her back, I couldn't help but think about how beautiful she was. Laura wasn't just my wife. She was the most stunning woman I had ever seen. And it wasn't just her looks. It was her heart, her kindness, the way she made everything feel like home. She was the one who confessed her feelings first, back when we were just friends. I hadn't been searching for love, but she drew me in with her warmth, her patience. I married Laura because she was everything good in this world. She was safe, dependable, and loving. But even as I held her close, my thoughts drifted back to Mia. Mia was chaos, pure and simple. Back in college, she had this magnetism about her. She knew how to control a room, how to make you feel like the only person who mattered, even when you knew you weren't. I wasn't blind to her ways. I knew she wasn't faithful to just me, but with us, it felt different. Ours was official. The others were hidden. She'd always tell me, "You're the best I've ever had, Caleb. No one compares to you." And she meant it. It wasn't just words. Mia and I knew each other's bodies in a way that felt almost primal. We knew how to touch ourselves in the right places, how to make each other feel things no one else could. She'd say it with a smirk, her eyes locking onto mine like she owned me. And in those moments, she did. Mia had a way of pulling me in, of making me forget about everything else. She knew how to seduce me, how to make me crave her without even trying. And I loved it. I loved the way she could set my world on fire with just a look or a touch. Our last night together was a week before my wedding to Laura. Mia didn't know I was getting married. That night was like all the others, intense, passionate, and unforgettable. I didn't have the courage to tell her it would be the last time. After that, I cut all contact. I thought I had moved on, buried her in the past where she belonged. But seeing her tonight, standing there in that club, so bold and unapologetic, shattered the illusion. Why was she there? Was it about money? Or was she just chasing that feeling the way she always had? Knew Mia was promiscuous. She never hid that part of herself. But this was something else. Laura shifted in her sleep, her breathing soft and steady. I kissed her forehead, the guilt threatening to choke me. The next morning was calm, almost deceivingly so. Laura didn't suspect a thing. She greeted me with her usual warm smile, serving breakfast while humming to herself. The guilt knotted in my stomach, but I shoved it down. "How's work going?" she asked casually as she placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "Busy," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Deadlines are piling up." She nodded, her concern genuine. "Don't overwork yourself, okay? You've been coming home late a lot lately." I froze for a moment, but quickly recovered. "It's just a tough week. I'll manage." She accepted my answer without hesitation, kissing me lightly on the cheek before heading off to tidy the kitchen. I stared at my coffee, the bitterness mirroring the taste in my mouth. By evening, I found myself back at the club. I hadn't planned on it, but my feet seemed to carry me there of their own accord. The dim lights and murmured conversations felt like a cocoon, separating me from the reality I was desperately trying to escape. Mia was there again, perched at the bar like she owned the place. Her wine glass glinted under the faint light, and her eyes found mine the moment I walked in. "Back so soon?" she asked with a sly smile as I approached. "I needed answers," I said, trying to sound firm, though my voice wavered. "Answers?" she echoed, feigning innocence. "About what?" "Why you're here," I said bluntly. "Is it for money or something else?" She chuckled, swirling her wine. "Always so serious, Caleb. Why does anyone come here? For a good time? To feel alive?" I shook my head, frustrated. "You don't need this, Mia. You're better than this." "Better?" She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Caleb, you've known me for years. I've always been this way. This is who I am." Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. I struggled to respond, but then she leaned even closer, her lips just inches from mine. "Do you want to go to the room with me?" The question hung in the air, electrifying and suffocating. I should have hesitated, should have said no. But before I knew it, I was nodding, my body moving before my mind could catch up. The room was familiar now, dimly lit and private. Mia closed the door behind us, her movements deliberate and confident. She approached me slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "You never could resist me, could you?" I didn't answer. Words felt useless in that moment. The days blurred after that. Every evening I found myself back at the club. I told Laura it was work, and she didn't question me. She trusted me implicitly, her kind smile and warm embraces a stark contrast to the secrets I carried. Even Jude didn't know. This was mine alone, a secret I wasn't proud of, but one I couldn't seem to let go of. Mia and I fell into a routine, one that felt as intoxicating as it was destructive. Every night was the same, yet somehow different. She had a way of making me forget everything, the guilt, the shame, even who I was. But deep down, I knew this couldn't last. Each night felt like walking a tightrope, and I couldn't shake the feeling that eventually it would snap. And when it did, the fall would be devastating. Mia had become a fire I couldn't put out, consuming every rational thought. The thrill of seeing her, of being with her, was intoxicating. And no matter how wrong it was, I couldn't stop myself. Every evening, I told Laura the same lie. "Work is piling up," I'd say, kissing her on the cheek as I left. She never questioned me. She trusted me. Until one night. I walked through the door, the clock reading far past midnight. The house was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. Laura was waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes tired. "You're late again," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. I froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Work ran late. You know how it is." She didn't smile back. "Caleb, you've been coming home late every night. I don't like it. This isn't like you." I hesitated, my heart pounding. "Deadlines, meetings. It's just work," I said, trying to sound convincing. She studied me, her gaze searching for something I wasn't ready to admit. "I need you to slow down," she said finally, her voice softening. "I miss you." Her words pierced through me in a way I wasn't expecting. I reached out, pulling her close. "I promise," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "I'll do better." She nodded, resting her head against my chest. "Okay." But promises are fragile, and I was about to break this one too. The next night, I found myself back at the club. Mia was waiting for me, her smile knowing, her eyes teasing. We spent hours together, each moment more intense than the last. As the night stretched on, Mia turned to me, her voice soft but commanding. "Stay the night." I didn't even hesitate. "Okay." The word left my lips before I could think, and just like that, I stayed. When morning came, the sunlight spilling through the curtains felt like a spotlight on my guilt. I slipped out of bed, leaving Mia still asleep, and made my way home. The house was quiet when I arrived. Laura was in the kitchen, her back to me as I walked in. "Where were you?" she asked without turning around. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension beneath it. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Work," I said finally. I stayed late and ended up crashing at the office. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You're lying," she said softly. "Laura." "No," she interrupted, shaking her head. "You've been distant, Caleb. You're always late, and now this? Something's going on, and I don't believe it's work." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of her accusation was too heavy. After a long silence, she let out a shaky breath. "I just want the truth," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But even that wasn't enough to stop me. The very next night, I went back to Mia. She was waiting for me like she always was, and I let myself fall into her all over again. When I got home early the following morning, I tiptoed into the house, careful not to make a sound. Laura was still asleep, her soft breathing filling the room. I slid into bed beside her, telling myself this would be the last time. Morning came too soon. I woke up to the sound of her voice. "Caleb," she said, her tone calm but icy. I turned to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice groggy. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her phone toward me. I froze. The image on the screen was unmistakable. It was me at the club with Mia. The photo was grainy but clear enough. My face, my posture, everything about it screamed guilt. Mia's face wasn't visible, but her body language told the rest of the story. "Care to explain this?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. I sat up, my mind racing. "Laura, Who is she?" she interrupted, her voice cracking. "And how long has this been going on?" I couldn't meet her eyes. The truth was there, exposed, and I had no words to fix it. The silence was deafening, the tension unbearable. "Caleb," she said again, her voice firmer this time. "Is this what you've been doing? Every night? Lying to me?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. To be continued.